Three supporting, not starring veteran players want to make changes for 2025 that could elevate them to the next level.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kasbeck, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week. This is the last week of that, back to 5 starting next week, and then we'll be doing that until December, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. Been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, 3 days a week for now, 5 days a week starting next week. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. All right, coming up on today's show, I want to get into 3 supporting veterans. Like, they're all kind of in a similar category for me in that they have at times in their careers been very good, and overall though they're mostly supporting kind of role players as opposed to like impact players. And that's Robbie Ray, Mike Yastrzemski, and Jordan Hicks. And they're all different in their own way, and their stories are different. But something struck my eye when I saw this article from Maria Guardado about Robbie Ray after he made his Cactus League debut the other day. And the title was "Ray Changes Up Arsenal Thanks to Tip from MLB's Top Hurler." And I was like, who's are we talking about? Paul Skeens? Who are we talking to? And it turns out that player was Tarik Skubal, which of course, now that once I read the article, actually, I think it was my mom who mentioned the article. I had seen it, but I hadn't read it. And she said, oh, it was Skubal. And so I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And one big reason why it makes sense is that they're both left-handed and they kind of throw from a similar arm slot. And so Maria Guardado has a lot of great quotes in this article, and including coming from Ray, but also saying something like, after watching Tigers ace Tarik Skubal dominate in the playoffs, Ray texted the reigning American League Cy Young and Triple Crown winner and asked if he'd be willing to share his changeup grip with him. Much to Ray's delight, Skubal said yes. And then Robbie Ray said he kind of just sent me the kitchen sink. He sent me pictures, video, everything. He was very open about it, and I was very thankful. And so just to quickly pause here on Tarik Skubal and the season that he just had for the Tigers, and then we'll also look at Robbie Ray. And, I mean, Robbie Ray, he won the Cy Young Award in 2021 with the Blue Jays. Was with the Diamondbacks for a long time. Skubal is 28, but he's kind of not been in the league that long. And man, oh man, did he just break out in a big way last season. Strikeout rate over 30%. I mean, this is Robbie Ray-like. Robbie Ray at his best is a strikeout pitcher. And I mean, Skubal was just nasty last year. And I watched him in the playoffs too. And the guy was very tough. I mean, I think we can even pull up his postseason numbers. Yeah, he pitched 19 innings and had a 2.37 ERA and a 2.38 fielding independent pitching. Walked less than a batter per 9, struck out 9.5 batters per 9, 27% of batters faced. So anyway, yeah, if this guy can help you, great, because he's very, very good. Anyway, Ray or Guardado writes that the two left-handers stayed in touch throughout the winter, with Ray sending frequent updates on how the pitch, again, changeup, was coming along. And so I do want to look up how often does Skubal throw his changeup. So in 2024, he threw the changeup 27% of the time. In his career, he's only thrown it 19% of the time. So he kind of decided, I'm going to use this pitch more in 2024, and he had his best season ever, 27% of the time. Whereas Robbie Ray didn't pitch much last year with the Giants, and in fact, he doesn't throw the changeup. So this is like kind of a new pitch. Last year he threw fastball 53% of the time, slider 32% of the time, and curveball 15% of the time. He threw a changeup. He actually had his first season in the major leagues with the Tigers. I didn't remember that. And then he was with the D-backs. He threw it 26% of the time that year. I'll have to look at how many innings he threw it all. But other than that, he's never thrown it more than 10% of the time. And he hasn't thrown it more than 5% of the time since 2016. So, and yeah, looking back, he only pitched 28 2/3 innings in his first major league season that came with Detroit. So it's not really been a big pitch for him at all in his career. So this is what Guardado means by saying Ray changes up his arsenal. So anyway, Ray said, I worked really hard all offseason on just kind of perfecting it. We have similar arm slots. He's maybe a little bit higher than I am, but very similar. I've always struggled with throwing a changeup, and I don't pronate very well. That's usually how you throw a changeup. The way that he taught me, you don't have to. It seems to be working pretty well. And then Guardado says Ray finally got a chance to break out his new changeup while making his spring debut on Tuesday afternoon. He still relied primarily on his fastball slider combination, struck out 3 over 2 scoreless innings, but he mixed in a handful of changeups and said he was pleased with the results. Quote, for me, everything's kind of like hard in to righties. Yeah, he throws that fastball, and then he throws the cutter or slider also hard in to righties. And he said, and I wanted something that had a little more action soft away to righties. And then Guardado says Ray put the new pitch to the test against all-star DH Brent Rooker, very, very good hitter, who swung at a first pitch changeup in the bottom of the first and then took another one down the middle for strike 2. Rooker subsequently laid off 2 fastballs out of the zone to even the count before Ray struck him out looking on a slider. And then Ray said, if it's something I can do that with and get that kind of result where I get 2 strikes with a pitch that is not one of my put-away pitches, then that's a win, because now I have a fastball and a slider that you haven't seen yet. He's trying to, and then Bob Melvin said he's trying to turn himself into a 3-pitch pitcher, just be a little bit less predictable. His breaking ball was good today. The changeup looked good in the bullpen. A little more usage is just going to help him out as a starter, obviously. And then just generally speaking, Guardado wrote that Ray said it took some time to find his arm slot last year after returning from his 18-month layoff with Tommy John surgery, but he feels more in sync now and is eager to show what he can do in his second season in San Francisco. And then finally a quote from Ray, coming off Tommy John, you just never know what to expect. But now that I've been able to go through a normal offseason or my normal progression that I normally would, I feel like everything is starting to click and getting to the right position that I need to be in. I think everything just seemed so foreign because it had been a while. I think he's talking about pitching last year with the Giants, since I'd been on the mound. I was really just trying to go out and find out how everything moves again. Now that I've had time to kind of look back and reflect on it and build on top of it, I feel like I'm in a really good spot right now. So it's pretty common kind of words that you hear from a guy coming off Tommy John. But, adding a changeup that you learned from Tarik Skubal is potentially, like I said, going to elevate him it could. If it becomes a good pitch for him, then that's great for the Giants. And he signed for 2 more seasons, Robbie Ray. So the better he can be, the better for the Giants. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to get to a position player who's also looking to make a change in Mike Yastrzemski. And before we get into it, all right, as promised, we're going to get into Mike Yastrzemski, another story by Maria Guardado of sfgiants.com. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, 3 days a week for now, back to Monday through Friday starting next week. Every dayers, tomorrow we've got a show as well. So really the next 6 weekdays, 7 counting today, we've got you covered here on Locked On Giants as the season gets closer. I think they start on March 27th, and today's February 27th, but it's a short month, so we're less really than a month away, a normal month. We're less than 30 days away from opening day, and that's exciting. Anyway, this story about Mike Yastrzemski comes from Maria Guardado again, and she goes, Yaz back in the fold. This, when I say she goes, this is the title of the article. Yaz back in the fold as the dean of Giants outfielders. And so I enjoy a good story like this because it doesn't seem like long ago at all to me that Mike Yastrzemski was acquired. I think it was during spring training in 2019, in the first spring training under Farhan Zaidi, and now he's the longest tenured Giant. So that's like the first sentence of the article. It says Mike Yastrzemski is the Giants' longest tenured player, but he's never allowed himself to get comfortable in the big leagues. And I don't blame him because it's not like he's a star. That's kind of what my point was, is that all these players, yeah, Robbie Ray had a Cy Young season, but Mike Yastrzemski also had like a season in which he got MVP votes. Granted, it was the COVID year, and so it was only a 60-game sample, but he was really good in 2019 too. And then he had a monster 2020, so it was looking like he was trending towards borderline stardom, but since then it's been more solid than a star. But there's just a lot here in this article, so I wanted to pass it along in case you haven't read it, or even if you did, to add some additional context. But Guardado writes that mindset is understandable for a 14th round draft pick who spent 6 seasons grinding through the minors before finally getting a chance to break in as a 28-year-old rookie. Yaz says, I think that's just been ingrained in me since high school and college. It was never your job. I never felt like I owned a position. I felt like I was renting it. I feel that way after every year. It's a tough business. It's true. Like if you just completely fall apart, you're done in this game. Like there's no guarantees unless you sign an extension. But even then, they might cut you loose and you'll just get paid, but you won't play. So Guardado writes, it's been 6 years since the Giants acquired Yastrzemski from the Orioles in exchange for minor league right-hander Tyler Erb, who, to my knowledge, has yet to pitch in the major leagues. I think he's still hanging around, but has not pitched in the major leagues. And Guardado says, a deal that will go down as one of the shrewdest moves of the Farhan Zaidi era. Yastrzemski developed into a fixture in the Giants' outfield after debuting in San Francisco in 2019, establishing himself as a Gold Glove caliber defender in right field while also supplying solid production at the plate. But heading into the offseason, there was some question about whether Yastrzemski would be back for a 7th season in San Francisco, or 7th season with the Giants. I can't believe this will be his 7th season with the Giants. Time flies. The 34-year-old veteran was entering his final year of arbitration and due for a raise from the $7.9 million he earned in 2024. That's just how arbitration works. You get raises, assuming you're just like a healthy, or just that you're out there playing, you get raises. And she writes, the Giants already had a deep crop of young outfielders on the rise, including Heliot Ramos, Jung-Hoo Lee, Marco Luciano, Luis Matos, and Grant McCray, making Yastrzemski's return far from guaranteed. So this was something we obviously discussed at the time back in November when the tender deadline was coming up, was Mike Yastrzemski as a possible non-tender candidate. So Guardado says the decision became even more interesting after one of Yastrzemski's former teammates, Buster Posey, replaced Zaidi as the Giants' president of baseball operations in October. Yaz said he didn't have much direct dialogue with his new boss leading up to the deadline to tender contracts to ARB-eligible players, though Posey ultimately recognized Yastrzemski's value by signing him to a one-year $9.25 million contract in November. I'm going to pause here and just mention $9.25 million on the open market buys you less than 1.5 wins above replacement, according to Dan Szymborski's calculations. So you might, it's obviously a lot of money in the normal human world, but in the baseball world, one less than 1.5 WAR is what, or less 1.5 WAR costs about $10 million. And Yaz has put up at least that amount. Last year it was 1.6. It was actually 1.6, 1.6, 1.5 the last 3 seasons. Although in 2023 he missed quite a bit of time. So it kind of, if he had played more, it would have been higher. But in those years, he's worth more than what they're paying him in 2025. And also that thing by Szymborski, that's 2 years old, so you got to adjust for inflation as well. So it's even more expensive, presumably now. So anyway, Yaz says in terms of the negotiations, quote, "I try to stay out of it because I don't ever want to really find myself or put Buster in a situation to do anything like that. At the end of the day, he has to make the best business decision for this organization, and I respect that. I'll never try and lean on one side of that relationship to get what I want. I've tried to show that from day one, that this organization has always come before myself. I try to play that way, and I try to act accordingly and kind of walk the walk instead of talk the talk. But once it was done," referring to the deal, "I had a nice chance to get on the phone with him and catch up personally, and then to be able to catch up with what's going on over here. It was nice that we have a relationship to balance." It is kind of wild that they played together. Anyway, Guardado says now that he's back in the fold, Yastrzemski is expected to reprise his role as the Giants' primary right fielder and bring some much-needed veteran stability to an outfield group that's brimming with youth. Ramos, 25, will be looking to build on his all-star campaign last year. And Lee, 26, could be a breakout candidate now that he's fully recovered from left shoulder surgery. Luciano, 23, Matos, 23, and McCray, 24, also have the potential to take steps forward and contribute to the mix this year. And then Yaz says, just keeping a little bit of continual focus on things that can feel monotonous, especially in spring. But I'm excited about this group. I think we've got a lot of talent, and these guys are doing great. They show up every day ready to work. It's inspiring for me. It makes me work a little harder too. Melvin said, Yaz is all about it. He's one of our longer tenured guys here. Somebody tell him he's the longest. He takes pride in being a Giant. He knows that these younger guys are not only part of our future, but part of our now. He's just trying to make it easier for them and make us a better team. And Guardado says one of Yastrzemski's aims, getting to the point about aims for improvement, will be to avoid having extended slumps this year, especially since he'll be eligible for free agency at the end of the season. Yaz says, I definitely want to be a little more consistent at the plate. I felt that I teetered on this line of taking off and coming back to scuffling. I want to have this consistent feeling of I'm in control of everything I can control and let the rest happen. So that's really been the story of Mike Yastrzemski from what I've seen offensively in his Giants tenure, is that he can look really, really bad for stretches, and then he can look really, really good for stretches. And so, yeah, I think this is one of those spring training cliches. Like, I just want to be better at this. It's like, yeah, everybody wants to go out there and be Aaron Judge or Juan Soto or the best player on the planet. That's not what Yaz is saying. He's saying he wants to be more consistent and avoid prolonged slumps. It always feels like with him that injuries play a role. Like, he'll pull, have a soft tissue injury, like a hamstring pull, and then like right at the wrong time. And then he'll come back and it'll take him like a month plus to get hot again at the plate. And then at times he's like then gotten hurt again right at that point when he's getting hot again. So, he's a guy who at his best looks super good. But again, at his worst, he's like an automatic out. And so, yeah, it's an important year for him. It's very possibly his last year with the Giants. He turns 35 in August, and being eligible for free agency at the end of the year, and he'll be going into his age 35 season, next year, a season in which he'll turn 36 during the season. I mean, like he said, he's not guaranteed anything. This could be his last major league season if he doesn't have a very good year. So, but he makes sense for the Giants because of all those young players that Guardado mentioned, because they're not committed to him long term. It's a 1-year commitment, and if he struggles, he's a good guy to have around, and he's also a good guy to have coming off the bench if like a Luciano or a Matos just proves that they belong in the lineup every day. Yaz could just slide over to that. He could platoon with somebody who's crushing lefties but struggling against righties. So anyway, I'm glad he's back. It's just his story is pretty inspiring, and he's been a good Giant. 106 home runs that this guy has hit now in the major leagues, despite not debuting till he was 28. So just a good story, and the longest tenured Giant now. Pretty amazing. And anyway, coming up in just a minute, the third complimentary player to discuss, and a change, like a legitimate change that this player is going to make going into 2025 to try to stop what happened last year. And that's Jordan Hicks, who came out guns a-blazing in his spring debut the other day. So we'll get into Jordan Hicks in just a second. And before we do, today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by Wonderful Pistachios. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling full longer. That's what I meant to say there. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's a perfect grab and go snack for busy days, whether I'm snacking at my desk here, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost. They're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, here we go. We're going to get into Jordan Hicks and another story, this one by Shayna Rubin of the San Francisco Chronicle. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. I feel like I can say that now because we're going today on Thursday, we're going again on Friday, and then we're back to daily Monday through Friday next week. So we made it. off-season mode over. We're back to in-season mode, and I'm very excited for the 2025 season for different reasons than I have been in previous years. I think the thing I'm most excited about is young players getting an opportunity. And it wasn't that I think Zaidi was opposed to this. It was that these players weren't ready, and now they just are. They're just brimming with a lot of guys who are ready to sink or swim at the major league level, a lot of guys. And so we're going to see that this year, including guys who did it last year, and can they do it again, like Tyler Fitzgerald and Heliot Ramos. But then you've got these supporting players like a Robbie Ray and a Mike Yastrzemski and a Jordan Hicks. And so what's interesting about Jordan Hicks is that, as she writes in this column or article in the Chronicle, quote, "Let it eat. Giants' Jordan Hicks reaches 100 miles an hour in brief spring debut." First sentence of this article is Jordan Hicks's first pitch against Chicago Cubs leadoff hitter Nicky Lopez clocked in at 98 miles an hour. His fastball velocity went up from there. And so that's wild. Was it his first spring outing? I'm not sure. But 98 on your first pitch early in spring? Whoa. A lot of time, gone are the days of like having to build up your arm strength. I mean, you still got to get stretched out, but still, 98? Come on. And then Shayna Rubin goes on to say, Hicks hit 100 miles an hour on the radar gun a handful of times and kept his fastball above 96 consistently throughout his 1 1/3 innings on Wednesday in a 4-4 tie. So you're in spring training at Scottsdale Stadium. Also how you're in spring training. He planned all along to, quote, "let it eat," end quote. He said after his outing, but the San Francisco Giants starter plans to keep on letting it eat when games matter. Jordan Hicks said, quote, "I feel I can go a lot of innings with that or at that intensity. And if I slowly dwindle, 94 miles an hour plays, as we saw last year. I want that intensity and now trying to hone the slider and splitter as we move along." And Rubin says Hicks's strategy heading into his second year as a Giants starter differs slightly from his first season. Coming to San Francisco as a flame-throwing reliever with the Cardinals and Blue Jays, Hicks paced himself with his velocity, averaging 94.5 miles an hour on the pitch in order to maintain endurance for an entire season in the rotation. That strategy didn't pay huge dividends. Hicks impressed in his first 11 starts, posting a 2.33 ERA over the season's first 1.5 months. But his season spiraled once he started to run out of steam, resulting in a 6.58 ERA over his final 9 starts. An anticipated move back to the bullpen intertwined with troublesome shoulder inflammation that ended his season on September 14th. This is relevant here. Rubin says Hicks came into camp this spring having added 14 pounds 14 pounds to help with his endurance and plans to get back to his flame-throwing roots. So there's a tangible thing. It's like obviously a cliche, best shape of his life, but adding 14 pounds versus, I'm assuming, where he came in last year, obviously a tangible difference, and pretty clear that kind of thing could help you not flame out or like get as tired as the season goes on. However, simultaneously, it's a little slightly counterintuitive to hear that he's planning on throwing harder with more intensity all the time versus pacing himself, so that, and also that he doesn't want to burn out like he did last season. So that's a little strange to me, and we'll see how it plays out. I'm sure there's a method behind it, and he's probably talked to coaches and whoever about it, but we'll see. Bob Melvin said it's who he is. Last year at times he was trying to pace himself a little bit, and that's not who he is. Both Hicks, this is Shayna Rubin speaking, both Hicks and the coaches say they are not overly concerned about Hicks's ability to maintain that velocity. Melvin said exactly what I just said. We'll see. I know that's what he's used to doing, and he's conditioned himself to go after it and see where it goes from there, end quote. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of that story. So yeah, I do have questions about that, but I also feel like when he started to struggle last year, it was the velocity was down. And so if he starts at a higher point, like 100, and then dwindles down to 94, like in games, and then maybe he starts to get hit a little bit, and that's when you get him out of there. It seemed like last year he was sitting 94 and then would dwindle to like lower 90s. And so, I don't know, adding the 14 pounds maybe just makes the starting point higher, and then the dip still happens, but it's still at a higher level. So it's a big we'll see. Like I would put a big red circle around we'll see on Hicks, who also has diabetes, the type that you're born with, type 1. I think it's type 1 diabetes. And so that was part of it too, was seeing how his body reacted to a season. Yeah, it's another quote here I just looked up quickly. Hicks wasn't alarmed by the course of his 2024 also balancing the complexities of type 1 diabetes. He wanted to learn how his body reacted to the role as a starter. He was pitching without a clear finish line at the end. He came into camp this spring having added 14 pounds to help with his endurance, blah, blah, blah. Not blah, blah, blah. It's just that I already read that. So anyway, 3 guys, all with, Yaz, there wasn't necessarily like a tangible thing that he said he wanted to do, but I think what's compelling there is just the role of Yaz and how it will evolve. Like, does he get supplanted mid-season by a younger player? I think there's a very good chance he does. But also injuries happen, and so if somebody like Jung-Hoo Lee or Heliot Ramos gets hurt, you end up needing, like, even if Yaz were replaced by a red-hot Marco Luciano or Luis Matos or Grant McRae or Wade Meckler, all these guys on the 40-man, he's going to play a ton anyway at the end of the day, and he can play center. So, yeah, and then these 2 pitchers who are going to be in this rotation that's beyond Logan Webb, there's a lot of questions. Verlander, age, Hicks, the collapse he had last season. Robbie Ray missed 18 months and then barely played with the Giants last year, but was a Cy Young winner in 2021, and he hasn't played much since 2021. And then a lot of young guys, similar to on the position player side. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Onay. MLB fantasy draft season is here. My fantasy draft is coming up soon too. Be the most informed fan and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a ton. So thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening today. You are now Locked On Giants.